We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Little Tuesday morning edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Love these Tuesday morning shows. The weekend is done. It's time to start to look ahead. We got ourselves a jam-packed show today. Should mention, by the way, we reacted in real time to Bruce Pearl retiring. If you missed any of that, make sure to go back and check it out. Probably we'll talk a little bit about Pearl at the end, but we got so much to talk about today. I don't even know. Well, this might be a 4-hour show. Just buckle in, grab your popcorn, grab your Collie Puffs, get ready because we got a loaded show. We're going to open one of the two mega games this weekend, Georgia-Alabama. Huge game, Alabama. What does it mean? We're going to discuss Kalen Deboer on Monday, though. Said something that really makes me believe that things may finally be different at Alabama. Sam Pittman, a new interesting report that says Sam Pittman could be out as soon as this weekend. Finally, mercifully, if you're a Hog fan. And could the old boss be taking over for the new one? We'll discuss that. And finally, we'll wrap with some odds and ends. The Nico Iamaleava new transfer rumors are already starting. Did you see what Lane Kiffin's daughter is up to in the lead up to this weekend's Ole Miss LSU game? And we will probably wrap with a little bit more on Bruce Pearl and a little bit of surprise in my opinion, on the pushback that Steven Pearl has gotten as the new head coach. So we got a lot to get to. Before we get started, a couple reminders. Make sure you're subscribed. Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. This YouTube channel is humming. 60+ thousand subscribers. I think we can get to 61,000 end of the week. I think we can do it. We're like 66 right now, 60.6 subscribers. We could get there, but we cannot do it without your support. Make sure you're subscribed, all of that. Also show available on Apple and Spotify. Producer Matt, whenever you get a minute, you can put a link up into the podcast feed. If you want to just download a couple episodes, help us out there. We appreciate your support. Speaking of support, you know who else's support we appreciate? Our friends and the official ticketing partner of the Aaron Torres Pod. Yeah, you already know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about SeatGeek. SeatGeek, America's #1 ticketing app. Listen, it's that time of year. You want to go to games. I don't know if you're a football fan, maybe you're a Bama fan, you want to go to Athens. If you're an Arkansas fan, you're tired of Sam Pittman, you want to sell those Notre Dame tickets, but you want to buy tickets for the upcoming basketball season. Well, whatever you need tickets for, concerts, shows, college football, college basketball, NFL, NBA, whatever, SeatGeek is the spot. What I love about SeatGeek, a couple things. One, they rate every ticket 1 through 10. Basically just letting you know what are the good seats, what are the bad. They give you a green dot or a red dot. Green dot means go ahead and purchase. Red dot means, we're being real with you. You should probably hold up. But here's why I really love SeatGeek. They take care of listeners of the Aaron Torres Pod. I love anybody who takes care of listeners of the pod. And how about this? If you need any tickets, go to SeatGeek. Because if you go to SeatGeek.com or the SeatGeek app, if you use promo code Torres, guess what? They give you $20 off your first purchase, $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek, SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. We really do appreciate the support of SeatGeek and the Aaron Torres Pod. With that said, it's a busy Tuesday. So much going on in the world of college sports. No more time to waste. Chat is quiet, by the way. Let's get to work, chat. I need to hear from you. No more time to waste. Let's get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day. Listen, this is, I know we've said it a couple times already this year. Week 5 of the college football season. We'll have the full preview tomorrow. Week 5 is the best one that we've had. Okay, so there's a ton of big games. LSU, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Auburn, Oregon at Penn State. But I would argue that there is no game with more at stake than what we are going to see Saturday night in Athens, Georgia, Alabama at Georgia. And when I say there's a lot at stake, I don't know how much there is for Georgia. Listen, you don't want to lose at home, but 2 weeks ago, you have the incredible win in Knoxville. There's clearly stuff to clean up. But to me, I do think that Saturday is sort of an indictment on where we are with the Kalen Deboer era at Alabama. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying if you lose by 1 point, that means that the dynasty is dead and you can never be good and you lost. No. Georgia's a great program. Everybody has respect for them. But what I would also say is I think there's a lot of people that are kind of on the fence about where do things actually stand with Alabama. You get boat raced in week 1 against Florida State. You then come back with back-to-back dominant wins over UL Monroe and Wisconsin. The problem is neither of those wins has aged very well. Now for Alabama they have, but Wisconsin gets killed, gets destroyed by Maryland just a couple days ago. UL Monroe is whatever. So you're going to be defined by whatever happens going forward, right? And so now going into Georgia, again, it's not that you have to win, but the big question is, was Florida State just a fluky thing, good team early in the season? You weren't prepared for Gus Malzahn and all the tricks that he could come up with 8 months to prepare? Or was it a symptom of, hey, we can beat the lousy teams on our schedule, but we aren't going to be very good on the road against the great ones? So we're going to figure all of that out. But what I will say is this. Kalen Deboer said some things this weekend that if I was an Alabama fan, I would be ready to run through a brick freaking wall for Kalen Deboer. By the way, Bama fans, as always, follow our Torres on Bama page, Torres on Bama, for all of your late-breaking Bama news. Great intern who helps me run that page, all of our Bama content, etc. With that said, let's get back to Deboer, because on Monday, I thought he said some very interesting things in the lead up to this Georgia game. And it's not so much about Georgia. Clearly, both programs, both coaching staffs have respect for each other. But to me, it was more about the idea of the mindset of the team coming in. He sat down during the bye week for a long-form interview with Alex Scarborough of 24/7 Sports. Alex, by the way, does unbelievable work. I knew Alex years ago. I haven't really been in touch with him probably the last 6, 7, 8 years. Doesn't change the fact that Alex does amazing work. And I think as importantly, he clearly has the ear of Kalen Deboer, because he sat down with him during the bye week to talk about the state of the program. And so Kalen Deboer in that interview talked about a lot of different things, a lot of changes within the program, even within the last month or so since the Florida State loss. He essentially said that, I don't know how to say this politely, but we know what the narrative was coming out of Florida State, that the team is too soft, that the coaching staff is too soft, that there's not enough discipline and whatever, and you're comparing them to the previous coach who's the greatest guy to ever do it. Okay, we get all that. But what we wanted to see out of Kalen Deboer and out of his team was more fire. And I think we've seen that over the last couple weeks, okay? You destroy 2 teams. Kalen Deboer got into it with a couple players on the sideline in a positive way. When I say get into it, I mean he really ripped into them. But I want to go ahead and dive into part of the article, because the article was really that Deboer has readjusted his own mindset and really just, hey, if this team needs a swift kick in the butt, then a swift kick in the butt is what I'm going to give them. But he also said this: it's one thing if you come after me. Don't you dare come after my players. So producer Matt, whenever we get a second, I will take the first quote from Kalen Deboer. This is what he said. He said about his new mindset and the team's new mindset: it's understanding the team and trying to figure out why we fell short of playing at the level that we know we're capable of. Then, and this is the important part, I think there's a piece too where I'm just going to fight for these guys. That's how I've always looked at it. When they get attacked in certain ways, and I know that there are some things that definitely could have been done better, those guys own that, and our staff and myself, we own it too. But there's also things that are just not right as far as what's been brought to my attention. And when that happens, I take it personally. I take that personally, that you're saying things about my guys that I know have high character. That via Kalen Deboer speaking to Alex Scarborough of 24/7 Sports. To which I say, Coach Deboer, I was not familiar with your game, but I love the attitude. I love the energy. And I know what a lot of people are going to say. Well, that he's just hearing the noise from the outside. He doesn't really mean that. Well, maybe, but maybe, just maybe, he really has had not only an attitude adjustment with himself, but as importantly, an attitude adjustment within that locker room. And why I say it is because within that Alex Scarborough article, he referenced an interview that Jeremy Bernard did either late last week, early this week. So Jeremy Bernard is a wide receiver at Alabama. For all the Ryan Williams hype, Jeremy Bernard is probably their most consistent player. But what is interesting about Jeremy Bernard actually played for Kalen Deboer at Washington. And so if you want to talk about a guy that has a pulse for that coaching staff, that has a pulse for the coach himself, the head coach himself, his ups, his downs, his mood swings. And, when I say mood swings, I don't mean that in a negative way, but, who he is as a person. I'm going to go ahead and believe the guy that has not only been with him in Tuscaloosa, but was with him at his highest of heights, was with him on the run to a national championship game, with him in the run, in the locker room moments before a national championship game, with him in the locker room during a national championship game, okay? And so here is what Jeremy Bernard had to say to Next Round Live. That's a huge radio show down in Alabama. This is what Jeremy Bernard said. He said about Kalen Deboer, quote, "He's more fired up. I mean, he just knows what's at stake." Coach Deboer is a very, very nice guy and a guy that doesn't really like to raise his voice and get loud and yell at people. That had to change really quick. He learned that. He understood that. He knows that he has to have a different mentality coaching in the SEC and coaching guys here at Alabama. And so to me, I love these quotes, but I will also say this. If Kalen Deboer was independently just saying, look, my attitude's changed, I've had to be tougher on these guys, but these guys have responded to it, I would certainly take it one way. But when one of his own players, who probably among the 85 guys in that locker room knows him as well as anybody, says, oh yeah, he's been a different dude the last week or two, I'm going to go ahead and believe Jeremy Bernard, and I'm going to go ahead and believe that Kalen Deboer really has ratcheted up the heat. And again, if I'm a Bama fan, I am fired up going into this weekend. Because listen, I'll say this, is that have I been critical of Kalen Deboer? Yeah, I have been. I think if you listen to the show that Sunday after the Florida State game, a lot of different things after that, we were very critical of who Kalen Deboer was and what that program was coming out of the Florida State game. And I still stand by a lot of it, and there's still a lot to prove this weekend against Georgia. But at the same time, I think there's going to be a lot of people that see these quotes and say, oh, he's been listening to sports talk radio and he's just hearing the outside noise. And he's saying these things because they're the right thing to say, because he knows that's what the fan base wants to hear. And I just don't know if I actually buy that, okay? What I truly believe, what I believe that Kalen Deboer is doing is this. He's coaching. He's coaching. He's managing his locker room. And he may be, and we'll find out on Georgia, potentially coaching at an elite level. And what do I mean by that? We all know what coaching is, right? There's a lot of different elements to it. There's guys that are great that can get up on a whiteboard and draw up anything and it looks good. And then you get into a game and it's kind of a disaster. Kind of talking about you, Billy Napier, but that's another conversation for another day. We don't have to talk about that. But part of coaching isn't just about going on a whiteboard. It's not just about saying the right things in the media. It's about how do you manage your locker room and how do you manage personalities? And so listen, we've all been around coach. If you're watching this show, if you're listening to this show, you've played sports. You know what tough coaches sound like. You know what easy coaches sound like. You know what players coaches sound like. You know what coaches, and the best coaches, whether it's Nick Saban, whether it's Bill Belichick in a different era, whether it's, Bill Parcells, whatever. The best coaches know how to manage each individual and really a team in general. And like I said, in the same way that coaches have different personalities, we all know that players do too. Anybody in a leadership position understands this. There's some guys that don't respond to getting yelled at. There's other guys that kind of need to get yelled at to get a swift kick in the butt. There are guys that outside of getting yelled at, need to, learn different ways and respond different ways and whatever. And so what I think Kalen Deboer has realized is this. I have the most talented football team that I've ever had. Maybe I ever will have. I don't think so, but you never know. But I need to change the temperature in this locker room. That maybe, and he said this in that first quote, is like, we got a lot of really nice kids in this locker room. But do they have guys, but maybe they just need guys that need a swift kick in the butt, that need to get yelled at, that need to see maybe they need to see their coach get fired up before they can get fired up. As he said in there, let me find the quote. I think there's a piece too where I'm just going to fight for these guys. That's how I've always looked at it. When they get attacked in certain ways, I know that there are some things that definitively could have been done better. So listen, I think what this really is, because people are going to say, oh, he's just trying to calm the temperature. And he's just trying to this and he's just trying to that. What I truly believe is that he's coaching, that he's looking around. He is seeing what an individual group of players needs and saying, listen, if they need me to be a hard ass, they need me to yell and scream, if they need me to maybe even drop an occasional F-bomb, even if that's not in my wheelhouse, if that's what they need, then that's what I'm going to do. That to me is great coaching. That to me is what a leader should do. And you shouldn't be rigid, right? If this is out of your comfort zone, who cares? It's about getting your team to perform at the top levels that they can. And to their credit, the last 2 weeks, Alabama has. The last 2 games, not last 2 weeks. We'll see what happens Saturday. I know there's probably Georgia fans rolling their eyes. Oh, my goodness, I've heard all these guys say that stuff before. You know, we got the real alpha in the sport with Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart's great. This isn't about Georgia. This isn't about whatever. It's about, can Alabama rise to the occasion? Again, we'll start previewing the games probably on Wednesday, but I just bring it up because to me, this is the tone, this is the attitude that I want from my coach after a disappointing year one with the performance and the results, and certainly a disappointing week one this season. He's got to prove it on Saturday. We'll see what happens, but I give him credit because I really just believe more than anything, I don't believe this is fake. I don't believe this is artificial. I believe he really has the tone of his locker room, and in doing so, he knows that this is what his team needs. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we come back, we got to go ahead and talk about, Kalen Deboer. If he gets blown out, maybe he's on the hot seat. You know who definitely is on the hot seat? Sam Pittman. It ain't pretty, and the big question becomes, if things go sideways this weekend, could he actually, finally, maybe be out? We're going to discuss Sam Pittman next, and a very interesting new report about not only his future, but who could one day replace him. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Auburn fans, we already know the freeze warning has hit the plains. Make sure to get your freeze warning t-shirts. Also, Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So want to keep the college football conversation. By the way, a little college basketball at the end. We did a full reaction of Bruce Pearl yesterday on Monday. Probably talk about it a little bit to end the show. Want to stay on football, though. Before we do, here's the bottom line. It's that time of year. You want to watch all the games. You don't just want to watch one, but you also don't want to pay for a million different services and apps and whatever. Well, what you need to do is check out the Circa Sportsbook and Circa Casino. Circa, of course, is our official hotel and casino sponsor, the official hotel and casino sponsor of the Aaron Torres Pod. Listen, bottom line, like I said, it's that time of year. You want to watch games. You don't want to pay out your butt. So you need a place to do it. I will say this, the Circa Sportsbook in Las Vegas, best sportsbook in Vegas, biggest sportsbook in the world, best place to watch games on Sunday. But here's the best part. I know a lot of you can't make it out to Vegas. By the way, I will be in Vegas for opening night of college hoops, as well as the Players Era Tournament, which is Thanksgiving week. We'll be doing live shows from Circa Sportsbook in Vegas. But again, I know many of you can't make it out. Well, here's the good news. Circa has opened a brand new sportsbook, Franklin, Kentucky, Mint Kentucky Downs. All the great stuff about Vegas just on the East Coast. And so I know a lot of you live in Kentucky, you live in Tennessee, you live in Indiana, you live in Ohio. Well, guess what? If you need a place to watch all these games on Sunday, all these games on Saturday, all these games when we get into November and December in college basketball, you don't need to buy a million streaming services and apps. All you got to do is go to Circa Casino, Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. Circa Casino, Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. Mentioned it a couple episodes ago, but I will be doing some episodes there. I'll be doing some shows live from the Franklin, Kentucky facility as well. We'll try to kind of do it around a big Kentucky basketball game, Kentucky whatever. We'll see what happens, but I will be out in Kentucky soon. In the meantime, you need to get to Circa Casino, Circa Sportsbook, Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. We appreciate the support of the Circa Sportsbook and the Circa Casino and all things Circa. Speaking of Circa, we got a big college football game in Arkansas. I was starting to look at lines via Circa. Let's go ahead and discuss what is very quickly becoming a very, tenuous situation with the Arkansas Razorbacks and the Arkansas Razorbacks football team and transparently all of Arkansas athletics. Okay, so listen, by now, you know that the last couple weeks, we've spent a lot of time talking about Arkansas. Really, to me, it started probably about a week or so ago. Hunter Yurachek, the AD at Arkansas, had that press conference. It wasn't a press conference. It was a speech, basically, for lack of a better term, at the Little Rock Touchdown Club. And at the time, he said something that I don't think any AD in the SEC should ever publicly say, even if he thinks it privately. He said, I don't think we're really built to win a national championship right now in football. I'm sorry. It's not what fans want to hear. I'll tell you what, nothing gets you less excited to write a check for athletics than hearing from your AD, oh, yeah, we have no shot. So listen, I thought that was bad. But I also thought on Saturday, the fans that are frustrated with the state of the program were very much justified and confirmed with what we saw in Memphis. Listen, we've talked about Sam Pittman's hot seat for years. There's a lot of people that wanted him gone. He comes back last year, hires Bobby Petrino, which we'll certainly get into in a second. They go to a bowl game, and it's been just a weird deal because we did Sam Pittman hot seat stuff in 2023. In 2024, he keeps surviving. But last week felt like a tipping point, right? Because it came off of the heels of the Hunter Yurachek comments. I hate to do it, Arkansas fans, but let's just be real. Comes off the game at Ole Miss where, unfortunately, it just falls apart at the end. And it happens after the Memphis game on Saturday where, listen, if you're watching this segment, you probably watched this game. But if you didn't, it was one of the great meltdowns ever where pretty much everything that could go wrong did, but everything that has been a staple of Arkansas football under Sam Pittman really since 2021, so the last 3 to 4 seasons, it all came to fruition, right? Awful defense. Tackling is an abomination. You give up big plays when you can't. The offense starts well and then struggles. You blow a huge lead. Then you have the turnover at the worst possible time. And to make matters even worse, and you know what I'm going to say, Arkansas fans, you have your timeouts. You're in position to get the ball back late, and the backup quarterback picks up 11 yards in a situation where they're not even really trying to pick up the first down. They get the first down, seal the win. So things are bad. Things are frustrating. And it does feel like things have finally come to a head. Again, it's one thing to lose a close game at Ole Miss. It's another thing to lose a close game to Memphis. And I think that's actually legitimately a huge part of it. If you're Hunter Yurachek, you can make the argument, we're just not equipped right now to compete with Texas and LSU, and even Ole Miss is ahead of us. Now, I don't agree with that, but I you can say it. You can't justify losing to an AAC team, no matter how good they are, no matter they were on the road, they were at home, you were on the road, whatever. And so I bring it up because it does finally feel like things are coming to a head. Should mention, by the way, always follow our Torres on the Hogs page, Torres on the Hogs, for all your late breaking Arkansas news. So, and there's going to be a lot of news probably in the next few weeks. So the conversation becomes, was Memphis finally the straw that broke the camel's back with Sam Pittman? And so I think that it was, and I think that he could be out as soon as this weekend. Now, the big conversation is, if it was so bad at Memphis, why don't you just fire him? And we're going to get into that in a minute. There's some semantics around it. The 4-game redshirt rule, you fire him after week 4, a bunch of players can take a redshirt. But the other variable is that Notre Dame is coming to town this weekend. And it's a big game. Probably every big booster that you have, even if they're mad, is coming to town. You probably have a lot of big dignitaries in the area that aren't even necessarily Arkansas fans that are coming to watch Notre Dame. And so the bottom line is, I just don't know that you want to do it the week leading into a Notre Dame game. Listen, Arkansas fans, I apologize for not knowing this off the top of my head. Probably the first time in forever, if ever, that Notre Dame has come to town. But it does feel like after this game, that's where things could get interesting. Redshirt rules out of the window. No, you're going into a bye, and it does feel like things could finally be done. Now, people will say, we wanted Sam Pittman out after 2023. It didn't happen. We wanted Sam Pittman out after 2024. It didn't happen. So why am I to believe that things are going to be different? Well, I've certainly heard some things behind the scenes. But what I would also say is another credible reporter, I think I'm pretty credible too, but Brandon Marcello, I think CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports, they're all under the same umbrella. He is as plugged in Arkansas as anybody. And he went on his show. Producer Matt's confirming for me right now. He is a CBS Sports college football writer. He's pretty plugged in at Arkansas. I remember last year he did the big sit down with John Tyson during basketball season. So he's plugged in. So he does a college football podcast called the CBS College Football Insider Show. And in it, they did talk a little bit about Arkansas. I'm going to play a clip from it in just a moment. I want to be clear. One, it's a little bit of a long clip, but I think it's important context here. What's going on? What could be next? Why it hasn't happened yet? Why it could? And who could follow Sam Pittman? Producer Matt, play the sound.
Here's another interesting thing about his contract, right? His buyout drops if his career record is below 500. So really kind of the magic number has always been, if he wins 5 games this year, his buyout's $9.8 million. If he loses 8, goes 4-8, it's $6.9 million. I will tell you this, talking to sources around Arkansas, buyout money doesn't matter at this point. If they feel like it's going to be the best situation, they will make a move in the middle of the season. Don't foresee that happening this week, because we talk about players entering the portal. That's one issue. Redshirt players, they can decide, hey, I'm going to redshirt for the rest of the year if my coach isn't going to be here. But also, they got Notre Dame this week. Then they have a bye week. If something's going to happen midseason, it's probably going to happen here in 7-8 days. And you hit on the Bobby Petrino situation. A year ago, I'll say this. There was a lot of reluctance about Bobby Petrino taking over as interim head coach if that opportunity came to be, if Sam Pittman was fired. I was told even at the time that Travis Williams, the defensive coordinator, would most likely be the interim coach. Fast forward to now, the weakness of that team is by far the defense. There's a lot more push for maybe Petrino should be the interim head coach. And I will tell you, from people I've spoken to, Bobby Petrino's been working them phones, baby. He's been talking a lot behind the scenes. He's positioning himself to take over the Arkansas football program, at least on an interim basis, if Sam Pittman's fired. That will be fascinating after everything that happened there a decade ago with the motorcycle accident, getting lying, and then getting fired by the former athletics director, Jeff Long there. I never thought I'd see the day where Bobby Petrino's even, talked about at Arkansas, let alone working back at Arkansas. But now we're very realistic chance, gentlemen, that he could be patrolling the sidelines as the head coach.
All right, so great stuff there from Brandon Marcello, CBS Sports. They do an awesome podcast. Yeah, I hope you listen to Torres first, but always encourage you to check out good people doing smart stuff, and they do a good podcast over there at CBS. So a couple things to dive into because I think there's a lot of layers there, and I think there's two different elements that make it very interesting. One is the part about could Sam Pittman actually be out after this weekend, and then the other part is who could potentially replace him. Yeah, we're talking Bobby freaking Petrino. Okay, so first of all, as far as the timing of the firing, let's go back to what I just said a minute ago, because a lot of people will say, Torres, they just lost to Memphis. If you ain't getting fired after Memphis, they'll give them till the end of the season, whatever. I don't believe that. And I even had somebody tell me, and I thought this was an interesting point. The Memphis win in some ways, it's almost like the Billy Napier Florida loss to USF. Remember I said after Florida lost to USF, I said, I talked to a Florida fan that was like, this is actually in some ways relieving because it just crystallizes that he's not the guy and will never be the guy. And so for Sam Pittman, that was a national game. Remember that time slot. It was the noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central window. Clemson's in a rain delay. Texas Tech is blowing out Utah. Everybody that was watching college football at that point was watching that game and watched the Arkansas meltdown. And so there is no way you can talk your way out of it. This wasn't on SEC Network. This wasn't on ESPNU going up against Alabama, Georgia, whatever. Everybody was watching, and it just crystallized. This isn't just an Arkansas thing. Because remember, we talked about this on Sunday. The concept of what is Arkansas supposed to be as a football program? There's only so many wins to go around in the SEC. Well, you know what Arkansas is not supposed to be as a program? Losing to freaking Memphis. And so I think it crystallized everything. But at the same time, again, the question is going to be asked, why don't you just do it right after the Memphis game? And I think semantically, there are two reasons, really three, why you don't do it. The first reason, as I said a minute ago, the 4-game redshirt rule. This matters, okay? Now, maybe at a place like UCLA that just got blown out in week 3, they didn't want to wait 3 more weeks because they were going into their bye. So they played 3 games, have a bye. They would have to wait till week 4, week 5, whatever. Bottom line is, like, UCLA was just like, we can't wait 3 more weeks to do this. But at Arkansas, it's like you don't want to do it heading into the 5th game of the season. I think everybody knows, but for people who do not, players can play in 4 games in a season and still take a red shirt. And so if you fire a coach 3rd game, 4th game before that, every player on the roster could just say, you know what? I'm good. I'm going to get the heck out of here. Or I'm going to shut it down and I'm going to start thinking about the transfer portal. And so you wait, and I hate to say it, but it's a maneuver that you do because once guys play in that 5th game, they're basically committed to playing until the end of the season. And so it makes sense not to fire him after that game. I think the other variable, as Brandon Marcello said, you're going into a bye, so it's easy to have a clean break. And then I think 3, as I said, and what I was told repeatedly was just, you just don't want to do it going into the Notre Dame game. I know that there's no buzz, and I know there's no excitement from the Arkansas fan base, understandably so. I think in some ways it would ignite the fan base more if Sam Pittman was not there for Notre Dame. But like I said, this is a game that I think, maybe the alum that's in, New York City or Dallas or LA or Seattle that only gets into town for 1 game a year, this is probably the one that they're flying in for. Like I said, there's probably people that aren't even Arkansas fans that are big timers, that are Notre Dame fans that are coming in. And this just, you don't want to take away from what will be the best on-campus atmosphere that you have, not only this season, but maybe one of the better on-campus atmospheres that you have for years to come. And so I get why it wasn't done, but I do think there's a very good chance that going into the bye week or going into whatever, coming out of the bye week, however you want to frame it, Sam Pittman is not the head coach and that the move is made Sunday, maybe Monday, to let him go, relieve him of his duties. The buyout money, I know it drops after he drops below 500. He is currently below 500, as producer Matt has so eloquently put on the board. Thank you so much. By the way, 14-29 in the SEC. Would love to know how many of those wins came in year 2. I think 5 of them. So I think 7 came in the first 2 years. So now all of a sudden you have, 7 SEC wins over the last 3, whatever. Anyway, the bottom line is, I do think it's going to happen. Buyout money at this point, it's like, who cares? It's just, you can't keep going on like this. But what I will also readily admit, I had not heard that Bobby Petrino was working behind the scenes to get the job. Now, what I had heard, and I actually said this on the show, I remember going into last season, Sam Pittman was on the hot seat going into last season. I remember we had my buddy Trey Wallace on the show from Outkick, and we were talking about this job and potential candidates. And he said, dude, could we see Bobby Petrino interim head coach? And I said, listen, I've actually heard they'd rather promote Travis Williams. Bobby Petrino does not, at the time I had heard a year ago, Bobby Petrino doesn't want to get into the rat race of being a head coach. He came to Arkansas to be a play caller, to design plays, to design offenses, to help with the offense. He doesn't want all the day-to-day media responsibilities, recruiting responsibilities, booster media. He just wants to coach ball. Okay. But what I will acknowledge is that Brandon Marcello saying that Bobby Petrino is working behind the scenes to make this happen. I'm not surprised. And I do think it kind of makes sense, right? You're obviously not going to promote the defensive coordinator from within. By the way, producer Matt confirms 7 SEC wins the first 2 years. Since then, 4-13 in the SEC. A woof. Okay. So Bobby Petrino, here's the thing. Like I said, I had heard that, that I don't think that necessarily it was a priority for him to get the job. Let me put it this way. I was in Arkansas the day it was announced that he was coming back as OC. Remember, they announced it at the Duke basketball game, which would have been December of 2023, if my math is correct. And basically, at that time, it was understood, like, Bobby Petrino's coming back to coach offense. He's not coming back to steal Sam Pittman's job, whatever. Now, I will also say, I think I will readily admit that I had no idea how popular Bobby Petrino was in that state, is in that state. I was at the Duke basketball game. They're chanting, "We want Bobby, we want Bobby," standing ovation when he's introduced. I don't think Sam Pittman had any idea how popular Bobby Petrino is in that state either. But I just bring it up to say that I do think when he came back, the intention was not steal Sam Pittman's job. It was instead to do the opposite, save Sam Pittman's job. And then I think what ended up happening is I think a lot of different things have happened. One, I think he started to realize, oh, this is a bigger S show than I realized. Two, you clearly can't promote the defensive coordinator from within. That ain't going to work. And then three, it's like, yeah, I think it's got to be tough for Bobby Petrino to be looking at this situation, in this context. His offense does the job every single week, and it's coaching decisions, it's mismanagement, it's the defense. It's like, if I'm Bobby Petrino, I'm like, what is going on in this building? My offense is putting – and listen, I know the offense struggled late in that game. By the way, they had a touchdown taken off the board that was ridiculous. Another conversation. But I just bring it up because, to me, I think Bobby Petrino's got to be looking around and being like, my offense is doing the job every single week. We got to figure out that defense, and we got to figure out the head coaching position. And so I just bring it up because it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me because, again, there's nobody else on the staff that really makes sense. I do think this is finally going to happen, and I think he's the most logical person to take over this role. So we'll see what happens. First of all, I'll say this. It would be the most Arkansas thing ever to just beat Notre Dame. Now Sam Pittman's back at 500 as a head coach. The buyout goes up, and you got to keep him for another, 2 months. But we'll see what happens. But listen, I do think that if they lose, and I think they're going to, if they lose, that ultimately Sam Pittman is let go. And then from there, I think it just becomes an interesting thing of Bobby Petrino getting the interim head coaching tag. And oh, by the way, can he do enough to actually keep the job long-term? I think they would want to make a clean break after the season if things don't get better. Obviously Rhett Lashley is going to be a candidate, former Arkansas player from the state of Arkansas. John Gruden seems to be very divisive. By the way, Matt, do you have the tweet from the other day? Just bring it up for fun. Somebody in the comment section the other day said Torres needs to be the next the next AD at Arkansas. And I said, the comment section is spoken, and I accept Arkansas. Orders of business as I become the AD. One, first of all, I'm going to have a press conference announcing that I expect to win in football. I know that's a crazy thought for an AD in the SEC to have, but I do expect to win in football. I know it's crazy, but that's going to be priority number one. Priority number two, I'm calling John Gruden. I'm calling the Grudenator. I'm calling the groomers are going to come to an end. The groomers are going to become groomality or reality with John Gruden as my next head coach. And then three, we're going to win a bunch of championships, bring a bunch of trophies back to Fayetteville and the beautiful area around Fayetteville. I don't think I'm getting the call as the AD. I do think that there's conversations about Hunter Yurachek being allowed to make the hire, which I don't think will happen. And frankly, maybe it just becomes a house cleaning next week. Maybe Sam Pittman is out, but they get rid of the AD as well. I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. By the way, now I'm just rambling, but stuff is coming to my head. I think one of the interesting things with these early season hirings in college, or firings, in college football, it seems increasingly clear that at both Virginia Tech and UCLA, I don't think the AD is actually going to be able to make the hire. The AD is largely a figurehead in both of those places. The AD at Virginia Tech basically acknowledged I'm not making the hire. The AD at UCLA, I think, has kind of had his knees cut out from below him. So I'd just be curious. Do you keep Hunter Yurachek and don't let him make the hire? Do you fire Hunter Yurachek with Sam Pittman? Or does Sam Pittman pull a win out of his you-know-what, gets back to 500, and now you got to keep him the rest of the year? So we'll see what happens. Those are conversations down the road. But if they lose to Notre Dame, I kind of do think you're under 500 officially. You're going into a bye week. Players can't redshirt, and maybe you just make the move. All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take one more break. We're going to come back. By the way, really quickly, since this is a good comment on this topic, Boss Hog comments on behalf of Razorbacks fans. I'm not an Arkansas fan. I don't speak for fans, but he says if intern Petrino wins games and they don't retain him as a head coach, the fan base will literally turn on the university. I'll say this. If Petrino wins games, I actually do think you would probably have to keep him, because how about this schedule coming out of the bye? At Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Auburn, and then you close with at LSU, at Texas, Missouri. So you still have, including Notre Dame this weekend, which obviously Bobby Petrino won't be the head coach, you still have 5 ranked opponents, plus Auburn, who is just in the top 25, Mississippi State, who's undefeated. So yeah, if Bobby Petrino wins some games against that schedule, then I think you would have to keep him. We'll see what happens. As I said, when Torres gets hired as AD, assuming Bobby Petrino doesn't win games, I'd call John Gruden. He wants to be in the SEC, but we'll see what happens. All right, so what we're going to do, going to take one more break, come back. We just talked about the 4-game redshirt rule, coaches getting fired, starting to get our first whispers of, could Nico Iamaleava go back into the portal this offseason? What would that look like? By the way, Lane Kiffin, his daughter's up to no good. Yeah, you got to see this story. And then finally, probably talk a little bit more about Bruce Pearl. An interesting kind of narrative is forming, if you will. We'll take a quick break. Be right back.
What's up, everybody? It's AT, and I've told you before, when I'm on the road, when I'm podcasting, sometimes you end up looking like a slob. Look at me, mismatched socks, I'm wearing shorts. What am I doing? The folks at FioBox said, Torres, let's get you some fresh gear to look better when you're on camera. Well, what do you think? This is all part of the spring collection for FioBox. These jeans, perfect when I want to go to games, casual, serious, business casual, you name it. Got the quarter zip. And oh, by the way, we got this perfect zip. This is the perfect spring, summer zip that you can wear when you're out with friends. Maybe it gets a little chilly. Maybe it's a little chilly in the morning. Perfect for all occasions. So this is what I need you to do. If you like what you see, and you should, what I need you to do is visit FioBox.com. That's FioBox.com, FIOBOC. By the way, FioBox has a special promo code for listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Use promo code Torres and get 20% off your purchase. Thank you again to FioBox. By the way, make sure that you're following them on social media at FioBox, FIOBOC. Thank you, FioBox.
All right, everybody. All right, back. Good to be back. I think this is the final segment of the show. So good to be back. We'll see if any college basketball legends retire during the show. Otherwise, we're going to keep the college football conversation going. Matt, before we get to the college football conversation, actually, you know what we got to do? We got one more partner. We got to thank our friends. We got to thank our partners. We got to thank Collie Puffs, ColliePuffs.com. Okay, so I've told you all about Collie Puffs, but family-owned company, not far from where I live, but that's important. But what's really important is this. It's that time of year. College football season, college basketball season is coming. You watch NFL on Sunday, Monday, Thursday nights. And when you're sitting on the couch, you don't want to be a big, filthy, disgusting slob, do you? No. You want a snack that is both healthy but delicious, something your kids are going to love, something you're going to love, your grandkids, whoever you live with, whoever hangs out with you on the couch, you want Collie Puffs. Like I said, family-owned company. Joey is the founder. Joey, football fan. Rams season ticket holder, and one day was sitting on the couch and said, you know what? I'm watching too much football. I'm watching the perfect amount of football, but I need a snack that is both healthy but delicious, something I'm going to love, something my kids are going to love. He came up with Cauli Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But the best part is they taste freaking delicious. Okay. At this point, you don't even have to take my word for it. What you need to do is go to CauliPuffs.com. That's CauliPuffs.com, CauliPuffs.com, or you can go to Amazon. But if you go to CauliPuffs.com, use promo code Torres, it gets you 15% off any purchase. You want to buy one bag, you want to buy 100 bags, promo code Torres, 15% off, CauliPuffs.com. We appreciate their support of the Aaron Torres pod. With that said, let's go ahead, switch gears. Let's start to wrap the show. And I do want to talk about, a topic that's, been a topic on this show for quite a bit here over the last couple months, and that is the situation with Nico Iamaleava and the UCLA Bruins, okay? So UCLA, we just talked about the situation with Sam Pittman, maybe gets fired after this weekend. Well, UCLA has obviously already made its move. I think it was the right move. I think it was the smart move. I think it was the only move you can make. You can't get destroyed by New Mexico at home after losing to UNLV on the road and expect to maintain your job. And that's what ended up happening. And Deshaun Foster was out. Tim Skipper is the interim head coach. And I'll say this, we just talked about the 4-game redshirt rule with Arkansas. We talked about the fact that players can leave, that can take a redshirt after 4 games and leave. The fact that the transfer portal opens after a coach is fired or resigns or whatever. Well, at UCLA, it's been pretty quiet. To the credit of that program, listen, we criticize Nico Iamaleava and a lot of the guys on that team, but to the credit to the guys in the program, it's been actually very quiet. There have been no players that have entered the portal. I think Virginia Tech had 1. UCLA so far has 0. Now they have 30 days to enter. And right now there's no indication that anyone is going to use a red shirt that was intended to play this season. With that said, stuff can change quick. And I will say, as we start to wrap the show, it was interesting to me that late last week, we did start to get a little speculation on if Nico Iamaleava will again enter the transfer portal after the season. Now, again, I know I just talked about the 4-game redshirt rule, the fact that players can enter the portal. For Nico, it actually probably doesn't make much sense to take a redshirt. As bad as the situation is, you kind of got to grind it out for a couple reasons. One, you already took a redshirt, so you can't take it now. There's no reason to enter the portal because I don't think most schools at this moment fully know what their quarterback situation is, let alone what the NIL situation will be. And 3, I just think you need some good tape, right? To me, it's whether it's the next school, whether, you try your shot at the NFL draft, which would probably be a mistake, but whatever. I think it's actually sort of important that he keeps playing, okay? At the same time, though, even as he plays, does not mean that there won't be speculation on what's next. And late last week, we were going to talk about it on Sunday's show, but there was so much going on. I felt like this was a good midweek topic. Saw a couple different reports on this is a thing to keep your eye on. And as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and start with a USA Today article, which was titled, quote, "For UCLA quarterback Nico Iamaleava, the transfer portal can't open fast enough." Okay. But in the article, there's a writer named Blake Toppenmeyer, who I think laid out a pretty good argument for probably the best move, big picture, will be for him to re-enter the portal, do it right this time, and find a better landing spot this time around. Matt, show us what Blake Toppenmeyer said on USA Today. Okay. He said, quote, "When they write the story," and this is going back a little bit to last spring when Nico really kind of screwed the pooch in terms of, the decision to, enter the portal when he did. But the conversation was, this is what USA Today said. "When they write the story of college football's transfer era, Iamaleava's vamoose from Tennessee will be held aloft as the paragon for how to mishandle the situation in the way the Exxon Valdez disaster became the textbook case of crisis management flubs." By the way, a lot of SAT words in that one that I was not ready for, but we'll keep going anyway. Iamaleava, and this is the important part, Iamaleava waited until the demand for transfer quarterbacks had waned before hitting the market. He got faulty advice. He misjudged his worth. He botched a good situation on a playoff caliber team and wound up taking a pay cut to sign on with a bad team that plays in front of sparse crowds. He continues, and this is, again, the important part via USA Today. Transferring again would allow Iamaleava to correct what he got wrong the last time. For starters, get a deal done in the winter and not the spring. Of course, there's no more spring portal. That's important too. If Iamaleava had taken care of his business last December rather than dragging out the situation at Tennessee into April, he would have had better options than UCLA. And so let me say this. I actually think, despite all the SAT words, there was a couple important points in there. And I think the most important point is exactly what this gentleman said, Blake Toppenmeyer. He said, the bottom line is that, look, however it ended up, listen, you can get the right answer to the test even by taking the wrong approach. Like, that has happened, that does happen, that will happen. But sometimes you can also get to the wrong place by making the wrong decisions in the process, okay? And so I just bring it up because Nico ended up in the wrong place, but he took the wrong process to get there. Listen, I think we all agree in hindsight, should have just never left Tennessee. We get that. But the point that Blake Toppenmeyer, by the way, I've been calling him Toppenmeyer, it's Toppenmeyer, said, and I think it's fair, is that if he had just entered the portal in the winter, his options would have been much better. Just go back to who needed a quarterback last spring in the portal. Now, all of these spots wouldn't have made sense, but Miami needed a quarterback. They end up with Carson Beck. Florida State needed a quarterback. They end up with Thomas Castellanos. You go on and on down the list. LSU took a backup quarterback for Garrett Nussmeier. But you think about all the schools. Oklahoma took John Mateer. Auburn took Jackson Arnold. I mean, think about all of these schools that needed a quarterback. And I don't know that I would put Nico Iamaleava above John Mateer or Carson Beck, but there were clearly spots that needed quarterbacks that he would have been in play for if he had decided to leave. And again, the underlying reality is that he probably just should have never left. So I bring all that up to say, we'll see what happens at UCLA. I think the cool part is that the transfer portal in the winter does not actually open until January, right around January 1st, kind of after the new year. So he'll get to see who's the new head coach at UCLA, and maybe there's a possibility that it just makes sense for him to stay. We don't know who the UCLA coach is going to be, but let's just use a hypothetical, like Jed Fish at Washington. Let's say that guy wants out. He has ties to UCLA. He was the interim head coach at one point at UCLA. Like, let's just say hypothetically, and I know the buyouts, whatever. Let's just say he gets the job. Whatever you think about Jed Fish, I think he's an idiot for leaving Arizona. Another conversation. He can develop quarterbacks. And so does it make sense to stay at UCLA? Nico will have the chance to find out. But the good part is, if you want to, spin this glass as half full, he will also have the chance to re-enter the portal again, assuming things go well, assuming things don't go well enough where he can go to the draft, which I don't think is going to happen. He will have options. And so, listen, I've talked a lot about Nico, and I feel like it's gotten kind of negative. I'm not rooting against Nico, but we have to be fair about the decisions that he made, that his camp made. And if his camp made all the decisions, at some point you're a 21-year-old making millions of dollars. You have to take control of your own future. So I hope he does it right. And I'll say this, it would be interesting to see what kind of options would be available. Now, I will say, in addition to the USA Today article, it was interesting because Sports Illustrated did an article of their own kind of listing options. Now, I'll say this, I generally don't like talking about players hypothetically leaving and where they could hypothetically land. I don't think it's fair to them. I don't think it's fair to the school that's trying to retain them. I remember years ago, this was 3 years ago at this point, but there was speculation that Walter Nolan was going to enter the portal and people were doing lists. And I was like, that's not really fair to him. Maybe he doesn't want to transfer, whatever. But I do think with Nico, it's a unique situation and other people are talking about it. So I'm going to talk about it really quick. USA Today did the original article. Sports Illustrated did a follow-up on hypothetical landing spots. They listed 3. I think 1 makes sense. I think 2 are far-fetched. But the 3 that they did list were Miami, were Texas Tech, and were Vanderbilt. Again, this is not my list. This is via Sports Illustrated, excuse me. In terms of the list from Sports Illustrated, not my personal list, I think we can go ahead and cross off Texas Tech. Texas Tech their backup quarterback, who's a freshman, Will Hammond, might be better than their starting quarterback, Baron Morton. He came in and was awesome last week. Vandy feels like a stretch. I don't know. Clark Lee, with the way he runs that program, with the accountability, with discipline. By the way, Diego Pavia's lawyers are fighting for another year of eligibility, even though Diego Pavia has said publicly that this is his last year at Vanderbilt. I don't know. We'll see. Diego Pavia is going to make more money playing college football next year than he would in the NFL or professionally or whatever. I do think Miami would make a little bit of sense, though, right? And I think Miami, obviously, look, whatever we think of Mario Cristobal, and I think to his credit, he's changing that narrative. Over the last couple years, and again, this is via Sports Illustrated, over the last couple years, it is worth acknowledging he has taken 2 quarterbacks out of the portal. One turned into the number 1 overall pick in Cam Ward. And Carson Beck, I think to his credit, has rejuvenated his career at Miami. Now, he wasn't great against Florida. That Florida defense is legit. And he still got the win, and they still put up 26 points and whatever. And so I bring it up because, again, we don't love speculating, but I'm just giving you what Sports Illustrated is saying, sharing some context. But I also think what's important here, and this is important, is the idea that just if he decides to enter the portal in the offseason, at the very least, he will have good options. At the very least, he will do something that makes sense for him. And at the very least, I'll say this, maybe it's unpopular, but I wish him luck. Listen, I think his dad really screwed up a lot of things for him. I wouldn't hire Nick Iamaleava as my personal consultant for anything, but I'm not rooting against Nico. I don't want to see him fail. Maybe there are people that do, and if you do, that's fine. He screwed over Tennessee, and he did it in an unprofessional way. These are professional athletes now, and we need to acknowledge it. But I hope he figures it out, and maybe I'm in the minority. I do hope he has a positive career. But yeah, there's some Nico Iamaleava conversations going on, and figured we'd just have a few of them. Want to end with some really kind of quick news and notes. One, speaking of, I guess not speaking of UCLA, the former USC head coach Lane Kiffin is in the news because Ole Miss plays LSU this weekend in Oxford. Ole Miss, by the way, interesting line movement in the Circa Sportsbook. LSU opened as a 1-point favorite. It is now LSU or Ole Miss minus 2.5. So a lot of money coming in on Ole Miss. A lot more money may want to come in after you hear what has come out over the last couple days. So Lane Kiffin, listen, he's late 40s now. I mean, those kids that were up to his knees at his Tennessee press conference. I mean, I still remember his Tennessee press conference as all these little kids. Those kids are now in high school and college. And it came out this week that his daughter Landry, who I believe is at Ole Miss, she posted a picture, or someone posted a picture of her with LSU linebacker Whit Weeks. And it appears as though they're dating. My buddy Trey Wallace was one of the first accounts that I saw to really find this picture. And Trey Wallace, my man from Outkick, says, I really love college football. Lane Kiffin's daughter Landry letting the public know she's dating LSU linebacker Whit Weeks 5 days before LSU and Ole Miss play. Peak mind games. One, I don't think it's mind games. I mean, if the boyfriend released it, that's definitely mind games. But I also think it's just, it's a young lady who's happy. And so I'm happy for her. I don't know that, again, I don't know that you want to launch this relationship the week of the LSU game. That's just me. But I will say, free betting advice here. Lane Kiffin, always quick on Twitter, responded to Trey Wallace posting this picture, and he said, quote, take the over in this game. In other words, Lane Kiffin, I think he's got a couple extra things drawn up for this game and for LSU. We'll see what ends up happening there. But Lane Kiffin's daughter apparently dating an LSU starting linebacker. Really quickly, I kind of want to do a quick follow-up from Tuesday. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this, or from Monday, excuse me. But Monday, Bruce Pearl retires, okay? And we did an hour-long reaction. Last look, 11,000 of you watched, so we appreciate your support. A lot of people listen via podcast as well. And it's interesting because, I don't know if I'm just too plugged into college basketball or college sports in general, and I'm not saying that as like a weird humble brag. I'm just saying it as a fact. Like, the news didn't really surprise me. Again, if you've been listening to Bruce Pearl during a bunch of interviews and media availability. He's kind of hinted, I got 1 year left, maybe 2. I'm not going to be doing this forever. Now, I will say, in the immediate reaction, I did say that I could see a world where he enters the political space. He said publicly after he announced his retirement, and by the way, he did all the media availability and the press releases and stuff after we went off air yesterday, so I obviously didn't catch it in real time. But he's not going in the political space. But if you just kind of tangentially follow college basketball, there were rumors that this was going to happen. And then, as I said on the show, there were 2 reasons why I kind of felt like it happened at the moment that it happened. One, it was the first, well, really 3. It was the first day of official practice. What does that mean? It goes from limited workouts all fall long to now you're in game season. So it's 20 hours a week. It's practice every single day. It's whatever in the lead up to the season, which is now like 40 days away, which is crazy. Okay. So you're not going to start practice as the acting head coach and then hand the reins over. 2, I also thought, advantageously, it's kind of a nice time on the calendar because it is a moment in time when the players, again, you could enter the portal, but they're not going to. There's nowhere to go. They can't play this year. The NIL money for the best players isn't going to be better anywhere than it is at Auburn. And so the team's going to stay together. And then 3, it was so he could get his son the job. And this is something that has been a topic of conversation with Bruce Pearl for about like 5-6 years now. I mean, every time a big job opens up, there was a reason that he stayed at Auburn besides loving Auburn. It was because he really wanted to hand down the program to his son, and a place like Louisville, a place like Kentucky when it opened, they're clearly not just going to give his son the head coaching job. And so I wasn't surprised when Stephen Pearl got the job. Transparently, I don't think Auburn fans were surprised. And I think most importantly, I don't think Auburn fans were that mad. I think most Auburn fans kind of knew this was coming. Whenever Bruce stepped down, his son was probably going to be the number 1 candidate, if not get the job outright. And I personally, just my opinion, I don't think it's the worst thing to hand things down to a guy that has been there and helped build the greatest teams in the history of the program. So I didn't think it was a big deal, but I'll be honest. It's not often in life that I am genuinely shocked by reaction from people to certain, news elements. And I was legitimately surprised by some people and their reaction to Stephen Pearl. Now, again, I understand Stephen Pearl's last name is Pearl. I understand. I know how genetics work, and I know how babies get made, and I know that he is Bruce Pearl's son. But again, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And then all of a sudden, I log off social media. I'm starting to get ready for week 5 of college football. Everybody's freaking out that Stephen Pearl is the next head coach. And oh, by the way, it's not Auburn fans. It's not Auburn fans that are mad. It's everybody else. And listen, I'll say this. I try not to criticize other media members. And I don't even know that I'm criticizing. But I think my buddy Justin Rowland, who covers Kentucky football, was kind of the first one to really put out something that I think really kind of caught the internet on fire. Justin, I love you. If you see this, I'm not criticizing you, but as you know, I disagree with this. This is what Justin Rowland said. Covers Kentucky football. He says, Pearl's son is a 38-year-old who worked as a medical sales rep for years until he took up coaching in 2017. Only ever coached under his dad. I'm sure it's the best hire for Auburn. And as you can see, over 825,000 views at last count. And it was a conversation that really sort of took over the internet of, oh, this is nepotism and this is this and this is that and this is the worst thing that has ever happened in the history of college basketball. Okay, well, one, let me say this. And I just said it, but I'll say it again. If Auburn fans don't care, I don't know why anybody should care. And by the way, to be clear, this is not a criticism of Justin. I'm just using his tweet as a launching point. If Auburn fans don't care, why should anybody else care, right? If Kentucky fans are happy with Mark Pope, even though other people make fun of him because he had never won a tournament game before last year, why would you care if you're a Kentucky fan? You know, if I'm a UConn fan, which I am, and everyone's criticizing Dan Hurley for yelling at refs, and I'm a UConn fan, I don't really care what a Louisville fan thinks, what a Tennessee fan thinks, what a Creighton fan, a Xavier fan thinks about my coach's behavior. What I'm thinking is, that's my coach. I freaking love him. And it's the same here. If Auburn fans don't care, I don't know why other people should. But also, like this notion that it's some preposterous hire, I don't get it. I don't get it. Okay, first of all, just fact check. Stephen Pearl has been with Bruce Pearl since 2014. Actually started as an assistant strength and conditioning coach. So you can't say that this guy hasn't earned his stripes. He's been there from the beginning at Auburn, started as an assistant strength and conditioning coach. Listen, if Bruce Pearl got the job in 2014, Stephen Pearl gets on staff in 2022 as the associate head coach with no coaching experience and gets the head coaching job in 2025, that is a lot different than the path that was taken by Stephen Pearl. He's been in coaching since 2014. He's been with Auburn basketball since 2014. By the way, Jon Scheyer got to Duke in 2013. By 2021, he was the interim head coach with zero head coaching experience anywhere else. Hubert Davis got to North Carolina a couple years before Roy Williams. I know he played in the NBA, zero head coaching experience. Red Autry at Syracuse, hired from within, zero head coaching experience. So I'm supposed to get mad that it's happening at Auburn? But here's the counter to all that. Stephen Pearl's resume is actually as impressive, if not more impressive, than all of them. Because at minimum, he's been there as long or longer when he actually got the job. And two, he was there during the greatest years in the history of the program. And so Justin and I went back and forth a little bit on Twitter. And again, I have respect for Justin. This is not necessarily a criticism of him, but he said something to the effect of like, well, that's clearly not the resume of a guy who would normally get the job at Auburn. And I'm like, the resume? You mean the lead assistant for the greatest run in the history of the program? That's actually, by definition, quite literally the resume that virtually every great assistant has before they get a head coaching job. Now, I understand. Again, I understand genetics. I understand how babies get made. Storks don't fly out of the sky. And I understand that he has the same last name as the former head coach who has since retired. But this notion that he's unqualified because he's Bruce Pearl's son makes zero sense to me. He was the lead assistant during the greatest run in the history of the program. He's no more or less qualified than Jon Scheyer was when he got the Duke job. And let me say this, Duke, Coach K announced his retirement, the retirement tour, in like June. So in theory, Duke could have gone outside the family. Now, Coach K wouldn't allow it. So if Coach K gets to handpick his successor, why doesn't Bruce Pearl? If Roy Williams gets to handpick his successor, why doesn't Bruce Pearl? Jay Wright, by the way, handpicked his successor. He did have 1 year of head coaching experience. So, oh my God, he's so much more qualified than Stephen Pearl. I don't know. I don't get it. Here's the other thing. And again, and in fairness, this would apply to Jon Scheyer as well, and maybe some of these other guys. Stephen Pearl has had opportunities to be head coach, to be a head coach other places. Now, why he decided not to, was it solely because he knew when his dad left, he was going to get the job? That's something probably only people with the last name Pearl truly know. But he had opportunities to go other places. Jon Scheyer, by the way, interviewed at UNLV, interviewed at DePaul, almost got the DePaul job. I know that for a fact. But it doesn't change the fact that he had never been a head coach when he got maybe the most prestigious job in all of college basketball. So again, it's just weird to me how mad people got. And it wasn't just Justin, it was just the reality. It was just surprised. Like, okay, dude's in his late 30s. It's not like he's 24 years old. In his late 30s, was the lead assistant during the greatest run in the history of the program. And oh, by the way, in September, you're not conducting a national coaching search. Now, again, I'm sure that's part of the reason that Bruce Pearl waited until September 22nd to announce his retirement rather than doing it on April 22nd when he easily could have. And so, again, I just listen, there are a lot of things for me to get mad about. One, I am not surprised that, darn it, I just got a text. We'll talk about that after. I am not surprised that he got the job. And is he the absolute most qualified person that could have gotten the job? No. But I'll say this, he might be the most qualified person that could have gotten the job on September 22nd, because again, a real coach isn't leaving his job once the season begins, which it officially did on Monday. So again, if you want to get fired up, you want to get your panties in a bunch, By the way, nepotism happens everywhere. Bronny James would not be in the NBA if it wasn't for LeBron. I'll be honest. If Arch Manning's last name wasn't Manning, I think we're starting to get an increased possibility that he's probably not at Texas. So it happens everywhere. It happens in coaching. It happens in athletics. It happens wherever. It happens in my industry. Not going to call out names, but, Iron Eagle's son being the lead broadcaster on NBC. And listen, I don't care. I'm not trying to be a play-by-play guy. That's not a shot. It's just a reality. What was he, like 26 when he got the job? I'm just saying, nepotism happens everywhere. And I would actually argue that Stephen Pearl probably on September 22nd is the most qualified coach that you could have got. All right. I got fired up there at the end. Never thought I'd get so fired up about Auburn basketball. Who could have guessed? Anyway, tell you what, let's go ahead and get out of here. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, please make sure to do so. By the way, I got really mad at that text that I just got. I'll tell you why. I had a buddy who just sent me a ticket purchase, and he didn't use SeatGeek.com promo code Torres. Remember, SeatGeek is the official ticketing app of the Aaron Torres pod. You want to go to any game, college basketball, NFL, college football, shows, concerts. SeatGeek.com promo code Torres gets you $20 off your purchase. SeatGeek.com promo code Torres, $20 off your first purchase. And also, we want to thank our friends, Circa Casino, Circa Sportsbook, best place to watch games, new sportsbook, Mint, Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. All right, we've gone an hour 10 on a Tuesday because that's just what we do. Ain't nobody else in the biz giving you content like this. We are going to get out of here mainly because my dog is barking in the background and she needs attention. I'm going to go. Appreciate your support. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick. You have had unblock me, bro. I'll be back. Matt, take out your notepad. We're going to come back Wednesday morning to preview week 5 of the college football season. Bama, Georgia, Oregon, Penn State, A&M, Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss. We'll see you then.